One winter day, a few years ago, I was the senior oncologist on a cancer ward in the hospital where I work. I stayed late, waiting for the husband of a newly admitted patient, and he came to the ward after his own working day was over, and I sat down together with him and his wife to talk. And I told them of our findings, that although recently diagnosed, unfortunately her cancer was spread and not possible to cure. My patient cried. Her husband looked down on his hands, resting in his lap, and I remember thinking that the room was very still. It's an immensely sad part of my work, and as I walked home through the snow that evening, I carried some of that sadness with me. 1 week later, we have begun treating this lady with palliative chemotherapy, and I work closely with her and monitor her treatment. And one day I ask her what she remembers of that conversation we had 1 week previously, and she looks very surprised. And after thinking about it for a while, she says to me, "I remember your earrings. They were glass pendants, and I remember you saying that there was no cure. After that, I really don't remember much else." Now, I don't wear particularly special jewelry, but I have been told more than once that patients remember my earrings, or maybe my facial expression, or even the pattern of the wallpaper in the room which we were in. They do not always remember the information itself. Why does this happen? Well, it's one of the very basic ways of coping in situation of extreme stress, and we call it shock. I have a very simplistic way of looking at shock, and I actually think that the senses shut down. When potentially very harmful or threatening information is directed at us, the body shuts off in order to minimize the damage. I am an oncologist or a cancer doctor. I have encountered enormous amounts of U-turns in my consultation room. People come into that room with a referral saying that they have a pancreatic cancer with metastases in the liver, maybe just as they were about to retire, or maybe just as they were about to have their first baby. Nobody wants to end up opposite me in that consultation room. It's a completely unwanted, involuntary U-turn in life. Quite the opposite to a voluntary U-turn, when somebody might decide to completely change career or move to Australia. Those can be quite joyous events, but getting cancer is not. The amazing thing for me as a doctor is to be a part of the process in which I witness people cope. And somehow they pick up the pieces and they move on with life, even though they have had that U-turn. Now the next thing, which we see a lot, is denial. The doctors must be wrong. I will get a second opinion, and then I'll get a third opinion. I will go online, I will talk to people, I will find a cure. I read about a woman who was cured simply by eating broccoli. Now, while denial is the main coping mechanism, it's very frustrating sometimes for healthcare professionals because it makes communication difficult. When I was younger and thought I knew everything, I tried to talk people out of their denial. I don't do this anymore, and I'm ashamed that I once did, because I've come to view denial as something which is essential for some people in that situation. Denial can be the only thing to hold on to in a situation of complete chaos. So these days, when my patients are in denial, I leave them be and wait and try to gain their trust instead. And then there is hope. Hope is a wonderful thing. Hope propels us forward in life and gives us purpose. The dangerous thing about hope is that we are very afraid of tarnishing it, of taking it away. And many doctors and nurses believe that by being honest to patients about their diagnosis, we will crush their hope. Some of us would rather lie to patients than to risk crushing somebody's hope. Now, I had a very wise teacher who used to say that hope in human beings is constant, never ending. It's what we hope for that varies. So, at the beginning of a disease, you will hope for cure. Of course you will. We all will. When that is no longer possible, we might instead hope to at least live for a very long time. And when that is no longer possible, we might hope to live until the birth of a grandchild. And towards the end of an illness, we might hope that we will be able to get a whole night's uninterrupted sleep without waking up in pain. When we view hope in this way, it's evident that when I tell my patients the truth and say that you have a pancreatic cancer with multiple liver metastases, I make them very, very upset, devastated. But they recover, and after a while they will refocus their hope on something which might be more realistic for that person in that situation. And thinking about it this way, which I believe in my clinical practice, I believe that this holds true, and it makes the work a little bit easier. Then there is reorientation. When you are told that you have a very serious disease, there seems to be absolutely no meaning. Why me? But people need meaning to survive and to go on living. And after a while, you find new purpose. Start a support group. Write a book about your experience. When I think about reorientation, I always think about a woman I treated for breast cancer many years ago, who was very upset about the thought of losing her hair to chemotherapy. And she lost her hair, and then she surprised me, and she came to my clinic with no hair and with a large tattoo of a dragon across her scalp. And she said to me, "Nina, this is my chance. This is my shot, my one shot in life at doing something bold. And best of all, when the hair grows back, it will be my secret." I have treated other patients who've used their diagnosis as a push to do something in life which they didn't have the energy or guts to do before. I have had a man who took his sailboat for a transatlantic trip. I have treated a lady who had a very high-profile job in the finance business, and she quit that job and she decided to start crafting children's toys instead and sold them in marketplaces. And I always think that it's a humble privilege of healthcare workers to be able to partake in this process. Now, for some people, unfortunately, we cannot cure the cancer, and they will go on to live until they get more symptoms from their illness and eventually die from it. I love my job, and one of the reasons I love my job is that I get to follow my patients for a long time, all the way through treatment to palliative care, and sometimes all the way to death. And I get to know my patients really well, and I know their children and their families, and I know the names of their pets, and we talk about a lot of things other than cancer. And this enables me to see another kind of coping mechanism, which I've chosen to name conscious denial. There's no such thing, it's my own term. And that goes something like this. Somebody who has previously been very well informed about their diagnosis suddenly goes in denial and doesn't seem to know that they have cancer anymore. And it always makes the staff very unsettled, and the nurses will come to me and say, "You have to tell this man that he is dying because he's very sick and he's talking about going moose hunting this year." And when I was younger, I did that. Again, I'm ashamed, but I did. I would go into such a patient's room and I would say rather bluntly that you are in fact dying and there is no way that you will go on the moose hunt this year. And again, it took me about 10 years of clinical practice to figure out what's going on. And I think it's something like this. When you are dying, you want to enjoy the good days. You want to be with your family, with your loved ones. You want to be normal. You want to have a beer and watch the game like everybody else. But your body reminds you constantly through symptoms that you are sick. And it's exhausting. It's tiring. You never get a break from this. And so in order to get through the days, you engage in a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of escape, and you start to think about the moose hunt and how wonderful that is, and the guys who are with you in the forest and the clear air. Or you think about that trip to the Mediterranean you did, and you feel so good, and you let that feeling carry you. And if the nurse comes into the room at this very moment and you start talking about the moose hunt, she will go to the doctor and you can figure out the rest. Nowadays, through knowing my patients, when I pick them up in the waiting room in my clinic, I can see on their facial expression if this is a day when we will be serious and talk about illness, or if it's a day when we might talk about the clear air in the forest during the moose hunt. And these days, I no longer force down anybody's throat that they are dying, because I believe that that individual has the need for and the right to some escape, and I respect that. Now, I will say this. It helps to have the right doctor. I want to be honest to you. I think that in every hospital I have ever worked, there have been individuals, doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals, who have a gift of communication, who wordlessly understand patients and can see if it's somebody who needs a bit of comic relief and it's appropriate to joke, or if it's somebody who is serious and who needs to address issues that they are concerned about. If you have somebody who makes you feel better just through conversation, you should stick with that person. If you do not have good chemistry with your caretakers, it can make the disease process a lot harder. So my advice to patients would be, try to find somebody who understands you and who you feel comfortable with, and that will make it easier for you. And to my colleagues, I would like to say, if you are one of those lucky ones who have this gift, you should cherish it and be sure that your boss will never ever give you a raise for this. But it's something to be very, very proud of, because you can help so many people just through talking to them. Now, I would say that the greatest gift in my work is through the patients to understand and to witness how life can be cherished, and how this too is a way of coping with the involuntary U-turn. When I go to social events and tell people what I do for a living, they always look very serious and slightly sad, and they probably hope or think that she should have been a pediatrician and had cute babies to take care of instead. And I always think that they have no idea. They have no idea what my working day entails. I get to meet people who have understood what life is really about. I get to listen to people who tell me about the smell in the forest that morning when they were out with their wheelchair, or how they were able to play a game of chess with their grandchild and how that 7-year-old outsmarted them. Sometimes I'm blessed to have patients tell me that the new pain medicine worked and they now get 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, and how extraordinary that is. And as a contrast to the sadness that I bring home with me on some winter evenings, I do get to bring some of these insights home as well. Thank you.